Mm. Hello, hello, welcome. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Today's session, we're going to be talking about caring for the caregiver. So, if you are someone who's used to pouring into others, then this is your reminder that you deserve the same care in return, right? Together, we're going to really reflect on setting boundaries. We're going to reflect on protecting your energy, honoring self-care not as a luxury, but truly as a necessity because it's what allows us to keep showing up in this work, right? So, as you're coming in, I'm going to repeat this a few times. As you're coming in, if you haven't done so already, please type your name into the chat, your name, your role, and where you're joining us from. And I'll repeat my welcome all over again for those of you who just logged on. So, welcome again for those of you who just logged on. I'm truly glad that you're here. So is Gina. Today's session is about caring for the caregiver. So, if you are used to pouring into others, this is your reminder that you deserve that same care right on back. Um, Together, we're really going to reflect on setting some boundaries, protecting your energy, honoring self-care, right? Not as a luxury, but as the necessity that it is, because that's what continues to allow us to keep showing up and keep doing this work that we do, right? Again, if you have not done so already, please type your name, your role into the chat, and where you're tuning in from. And I'll read a few of them here. We have Angie is a child life specialist. Um, we have Kim from Tabernacle, New Jersey. She's a social worker. Melody from Columbus, Ohio. So glad you're here. We have Steph, who's a therapist in Delaware. Awesome. We have Ohio, a lot of Ohio in the house. North Jersey, North Carolina. We have Bob, who's a spiritual counselor and chaplain from North Carolina. Oh my goodness, keep them coming. I love reading them. As you guys are all doing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Good Grief.
Ohio in the house is good because I went to college in Ohio. I'm just gonna say that.
Oh, nice. See, there you
Yay.
go. It's all connected, 6 degrees of separation. So for those of you who are new to Good Grief, we are a nonprofit organization that has been around in New Jersey since 2004. And our mission, as you see on your screen, is to build resilience in children, strengthen families, and really empower communities to grow from loss and adversity. And for most of our organization's history, we have been providing free, and I always like to pause on that because I don't know what else is free these days, right? So we provide free and unlimited peer support programs to grieving children and families. And our kids that come in start at about uh, age 3 through young adulthood. And we do this in our centers. We have one in Morristown and one in Princeton, and I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. But in more recent years, our work has really been growing through education and through advocacy work. We're able to provide training and curriculum and resources to schools, to the healthcare industry, to the funeral industry, to different corporations, right? And really just any space where we can empower professionals and parents and the broader community to support the needs of children and families who are facing loss and adversity. So as I mentioned before, we have 2 centers, right? You can see here we have our lovely little house in Morristown. It's 37 Elm Street. And the need and the response at our Morristown Center just kept growing, right? And it really required Good Grief to continue to grow their programs each year. So in 2012, Good Grief responded to that emerging need of families traveling long distances to and from Morristown, right? So we bought Good Grief programs to Princeton. And so our 5 Mapleton Place, right over here, was born, right? Became our second location. So beyond their nights of support, Good Grief also runs a grief expressions camp. We provide programming in schools, hospitals, healthcare settings, like I said before. And we also have tons of very valuable training and PD experiences, like our Spring Institute that just passed, as well as these free community webinars that we do every month that you are all joining us here today, right? So we truly strive to continually bring the work that we do in our centers outside, and we like to say that we like to go to where the grief is, right? We really practice what we preach in our mission, and we really want to enable communities to support one another, and we really want to build that resiliency. I am so excited for today's session. We have my esteemed colleague, Gina. I'm going to let her introduce herself, even though she's very, very humble. So if there's some things in there that she doesn't say, I might type it into the chat. So with that, I will give you Gina. Oh, before I give you Gina, I should give you emails, right? If you're interested in learning more about our programming, maybe a tour, we can talk about the intentionality of the spaces that we use, maybe some ideas that you can take back to your clients, to your schools, or even your families. Shoot us an email at info@good-grief.org. And if you're interested in learning more about Good Grief Schools, about our curriculum, about running grief groups within those walls, you can email us at education@good-grief.org. I teased you. I said Gina was coming, but now I'm serious. Now it's now Gina, take it away.
Thank you, Annette. Hello and welcome, everyone. I come from such a place of deep gratitude to be with you all on this webinar for all that you do to support the grief of others and probably your own grief as well. And one of my fellow Good Grief facilitators recently sent me a poem that so resonates with our work, and so I wanted to share it with all of you as we begin today. And it's called When You Meet Someone in Deep Grief, and it's by Patricia McKernan Runkle. You'll see later on why I love writing and reflecting and poetry in order for us to do this work. But it goes like this. Slip off your needs and set them by the door. Enter barefoot this darkened chapel, hallowed by loss, hallowed by sorrow, its gray stone walls and floor. You, congregation of one, are here to listen, not to sing. Kneel in the back pew, make no sound, let the candles speak. And yet, when we support others, it's impossible for us to not be affected. So, being in a role of supporting end of life work and supporting grievers for over 40 years in my career is my passion, it's my calling. And in addition to supporting children and grieving children and families through the years, one of my most favorite roles I had and hats I wore was supporting staff and anyone else who's supporting grievers. So just a little caveat, this is a huge topic. There are a variety of roles on this webinar, so I hope much of it will resonate with you, that you will gain insight and some tools from our time together. But feel free to email me with anything you need outside of this, and we can connect in the future. So, a little bit about me. I'm Gina Kornfein. My pronouns are she and her. I have a dual master's degree in early childhood special ed and social work. And I'm the community outreach and training manager at Good Grief. I facilitate 3 support groups there. And yes, we serve children, that's our main focus, but we serve the adults that come with them. So I run a spousal loss group. It happens to be all moms right now. We run a child loss group, and we have a caregiver group, which is mostly grandparents, sometimes aunts and uncles who are raising their grieving grandchildren, nieces, and nephews. And I'm through the Princeton Center. But for the past 30 years before I came to Good Grief, I was a hospital-based pediatric palliative care and bereavement social worker. And with all of that being said, I'm a huge advocate for providing opportunities, what we call post-traumatic growth. A few other things to know about me. I'm a mom to 4 daughters, ages 23 to 33. Lots of gray hair under this color. I'm a native Californian and a recent and very happy transplant to New Jersey. I played collegiate volleyball and I love to watch all sports. That's my self-care. And March Madness is my favorite time of year, especially the women's bracket. It's very exciting. And I love to bake and hike and be by the water. And I do have 2 dogs that are really lovely to receive love from. So we come together today knowing that everyone is going to experience loss and grief in their lifetime. Annette always says, I don't know about you, but the death rate in my family is 100%. So grief and loss are just such part of the human experience. And yet we live in a culture that is not very comfortable with grief and loss. When I was at UCLA for 13 years, I had to do a lot to help inform the culture. When I got there, everything about grief was in the bottom of a drawer. And by the end of time, we had debriefings every week. We were really practicing sitting with this and supporting one another. Um, and one of my grief celebrities, Frances Weller, who wrote a great book I'm going to share with you, says that grief is not a problem to be solved. It's not a condition to necessarily be medicated, but it's a deep encounter with an essential experience of being human. So today we're going to look at the foundation of your grief support role. We're going to look at our own stories with grief and loss because our narratives do impact our ability to support grievers. And to be able to be sustainable in our roles, we have to practice healthy boundaries. I could give an entire talk on this, but just a snippet today. And then we're going to look at how we can create grief support for ourselves in our environment or community. And finally, I'm going to share some tools for you to create your own individualized support plan for your emotional health and sustainability in this role. But before we begin our work together, like we always do at Good Grief, we are going to do an opening ritual. And at Good Grief, we're very big on rituals. They have nothing to do with religion. But rituals are a way of beginning our time together and grounding ourselves. And we're all coming from somewhere, and we're all going to go back to something after we finish this webinar. So, a ritual is a way for us to pause and gently check in with ourselves and get us centered for the next hour. And this ritual is called Catch and Carry, and it asks two simple questions of you. So, what am I carrying today, and what do I hope to catch in this space? And carrying might be a feeling, a memory, something unspoken you've been holding on to lately, maybe about someone you're supporting. And catching is what you hope to receive, maybe comfort or clarity or some specific tools or a moment to breathe. So I invite you to just write a short phrase in the chat, or you can reflect silently. And there's no pressure to be profound. Just see what comes. This is just about your presence and your truths as you arrive. So we'll just open that up for you. We do this a lot sometimes with our professional developments, or we do it even on a night of support at our centers with our participants. Helps to get a pulse and it helps us center.
I just typed it into the chat so that folks can see it. So again, this ritual just asks two simple questions. What am I carrying today? And what do I hope to catch in this space? So if you feel comfortable, please type it into the chat. If not, we'll just sit here for a little bit and kind of just take this in if you want to reflect silently.
It's hard when our minds when we're being asked to do so much these days and we have a lot
Mm.
of layers.
I am carrying numbness and I'd like to catch ideas. Stress is what I'm carrying, and I hope to get relief and comfort. We have carry anticipatory grief for my young adult son with complex needs and health concerns, and catch heartfelt lived experience tips on how to support others who grieve. Um, Carrying excitement, hoping to catch ideas. We have I'm carrying worries, and I'd like to catch calmness and stability.
Mm, mm,
Oh, we have another one. I'm carrying a painful growth within my metamorphosis stage. Oh, that's so beautiful.
mm,
Shedding an old layer of myself while inviting the new and still dealing with daily life struggles. I hope to catch a slice of peace and more knowledge to continue my growth and also still help others as well.
mm.
I'm carrying responsibility and I'm hoping to catch peace and relief. I'm carrying my to-do list and the busyness of the day, and I'm hoping to catch wisdoms from you, Gina.
Mm. Okay, well, because we have a limited time and these are just so powerful and so real, and I relate to so many of them, I want to move along so that I can give you some peace, I can give you some tools. As my therapists have said over the years, we need 1,000 tools and tricks to get through life. So let's see if some of these can bring some peace and some ideas and some perspective. Um, so, what we're looking at is the powerful role that we all have in grieving, in supporting grieving person is very sacred. And it is an honor to accompany that person or be with yourself in the metamorphosis. I love that. And yet this opportunity and invitation and being present for ourselves and others does require the introspection and guidance for us to be sustainable. So we have to demonstrate emotional sturdiness when we're in caregiving roles, whether it's in our families or whether it is, and with children, adult children, young children, or at work, but without sacrificing the expression of compassion. So that balance is sometimes tricky, but we start with self-awareness, and we want to kind of find a balance of self-protection, being with, and being able to be wholly present for others. So when we revisit our own losses and our own grief, we often unearth these big and deep emotions. And it's very helpful to engage in some therapy and counseling because this unpacking, this unlayering, this acknowledging and awareness building is nuanced, and I think it's fairly lifelong. And also finding a grief support group if you need to and you have grief. I find that support groups are such a wonderful way to be amongst people who get it and look at things and get ideas that you might not know. But we try to say at Good Grief, and in my practice, it's never too late to look at your own narrative. And I love to give the example of a social worker I met at a perinatal loss conference 20 years ago who was caring for other people in her position who were grieving. And she acknowledged for the first time in our conference, in our room, in front of a group, that she had had a stillborn baby daughter full term 30 years ago and really had never talked much about it, dealt with it. Her family kind of pushed it away and buried it. And she was sobbing and said this was the first time she was saying her baby's name out loud, which I will never forget was Megan, and that she was going to begin to embrace her grief and profound loss, especially because she felt called to do that work. So this kind of unearthing is really important. So what I encourage you to consider is looking at your own loss history and inventory. And at Good Grief, we call these writing your loss lines. You could do this on a piece of paper, you can do this over time, but that's just not loss by death. It could be the non-death losses of divorce and moving and incarceration and addiction and infertility, of loss of a dream, loss of a job, disability, dementia, so much more affects us. Look at our own grief practices that we inherited from our upbringing. Did you talk about feelings growing up and talk about the person, or were you told to stay strong and move on? Or did you go to wakes? So looking at those things is a really important thing with what you bring. And you have a chance now to kind of redo those and how you want to. Looking at your own cultural, religious beliefs and practices, is there hope of eternal life and concept of heaven, or is it embracing the unknown and focused on legacy and theories of impermanence? So there's a wide range there of what you experienced. And then being able to look at your own experiences as potential triggers or over identification. So when the person that we're caring for or supporting has something in common with us, maybe it's an age, maybe it's a specific situation, the nature of the loss. We were working with someone that was going to have their child be on hospice, and they had had a hospice experience with their own parent when they were younger, and it was really traumatic and troublesome. So when we mentioned hospice, we had to realize that people have different experiences with things. Maybe we had a pregnancy loss, and that all of these come flowing back when we're supporting others, because these triggers can bring back complex feelings. And our emotions and stories impact our ability to support. And we don't want to sell the grievers short because we're not looking at and processing our own issues. So I always say, whatever your role, your story matters so you can show up and be fully present for their story. And we want to look at a framework in our role. And we have a lot of different roles here today. I know that we have therapists, I know we have educators, we may have volunteers, we have family members, we have colleagues, we have people in the organ donation, child life specialists, a huge range. But the bottom line for that I come from is the frame of companioning, and that's Alan Wolfelt, who talks about being in the boat with the person. And you're supporting them, you're in that boat, but they're rowing, and we can guide and accompany them. They guide, but we accompany them. And our goal is to build trust with someone we're supporting. And again, you're in a variety of places where you're supporting them. And another metaphor we use is that being the crust, and that's a good grief metaphor that I love. And the goal is that we want to create a solid crust, a safe and trusting space, and have our role be clear. And that might be dictated by your profession so that the grievers feel supported and that the crust is strong and they're the filling. They're the main part. And we always say a soggy and loose crust does not hold the filling well. We need to be sturdy. And all of these role definitions help us with our bandwidth to support others. Because a lot of us might go into this work being what I call a compulsive caretaker, and find it very easy to support, but having a role definition is really important. And we'll talk about boundaries in a minute. And we want to make sure that within our role we have time frames. Maybe it's 50 minutes in therapy. If it's a personal support you're doing, maybe it's a walk once a week, but letting other people take that term. It's a manageable frequency for yourselves. And as Annette always loves to say, we have the real and the ideal. Because I know some of you, we're going to have to stay late sometimes at work, but being able to kind of leave on time and really be present in a manageable way is our goal. And for family members that are supporting others, finding ways of allowing people to help you who offered. And it's hard sometimes to ask for help. Maybe when we were the helper, we were that person everyone went to, right? But if a friend group wants to create meals, or you need to say, hey, we only need a meal once a week, or if someone offers to create a schedule to help with surviving children, allow that. And, you know, we're not there to fix, but they to have their grief be witnessed and held. So in any role you find yourselves, keep in mind the power of silence, that you're going to be able to embrace vulnerability, and being able to touch wounds with a gentle and tender hand. And those are a few little goals. Another thing I just want to share, and we could do again, I did a whole talk on this when I worked in social work, was providing culturally sensitive grief support. And Linda Garcia, you're going to get these slides, I believe, so you'll be able to look at them in depth. But Linda Garcia, a social worker from Children's Hospital LA, shared this with us, and it's just an insight to remember that you're supporting the whole person, and not even two people in the same household or the same culture will grieve in the same way. But considering grief sensitive practice is important. And a few things I want to share with you are looking at your own cultural beliefs and values about death, accessing traditions you may have put away, asking the griever what rituals their culture uses, be willing to do what is necessary to facilitate those rituals, especially at end of life in a hospital. We had to do some creative things sometimes that hospital administration didn't always feel so great about, but we wanted to help respect that person's culture and religious values. But if you can't, connect the griever with people who can help and be aware of your own limitations. But just being able to listen and respect differences, and accepting their need to grieve in their own way. It may not be your way. And on to the subject of boundaries, which is so critical. And I think without touching on this, we really can find ourselves in a non-sustainable role, caregiving role. So boundaries are key, and I like to define them. It is guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to ensure physical, emotional, or spiritual safety. And the focus of our relationship as a support person and a caregiver needs to be based on trust and advocacy, on the patient or client or their needs only. It should never be based on our needs. And that could be our needs for time, or sometimes our validation as a provider, attention, or love. It's about them. And we look at the notion of under-involvement versus over-involvement. We want to make sure our support is equal to all the people we support. So, for example, we want to limit or not have secretive or special favors for certain people. People that we're supporting, especially in a group setting, notice favoritism. So if there's a resource you want to connect someone to, go through their social worker, go through the family services manager. Especially if we're volunteering, not coming from us. Because being over involved really becomes a slippery slope. It can lead to promises you can't keep, and that unintentionally abandons the person you're supporting, which is another type of loss. And I love to give an example. of a grieving mom I worked with whose baby was really, really sick for a year in our NICU, and a nurse became very involved and very passionate. And I know how easy that is to happen, but and promised that as, when this child was going to die, she'd be there the whole way. Well, it got so deep and heavy that when this child died a little over a year of age, it was so hard on the nurse that she just had to kind of step out. She even had to take a break from work. And this mom that we were supporting kept saying, "Where's so and so?" Well, she said she'd always be there. And every session was about, I just wish that nurse could be there. And it really affected her. It was really powerful. So never giving your cell phone or social media can lead to a slippery slope too. Never going to their homes. I've spent many hours with healthcare providers who found themselves after birthday parties, then being in the middle of helping support a grieving person's divorce. Um, there's certain um, children's hospitals where if a staff member has their personal cell phone out, they were fired on the spot. That's how much they want us to have a boundary there. Being careful of excessive self-disclosure. Um, this is about them, not us. Once in a while, if it helps growth, there can be some generalized self-disclosure, but we really want this is their focus is the share. Their space is the share of our focus. Um, Zone of helpfulness is a concept I love. If you are wondering, this takes experience and time. We don't always know kind of what to do with what they ask. But if you're wondering if something is appropriate or not to do, defer to saying no, or let me see, or consult with colleagues. Because we think we have endless tanks, but we don't. We have a limited amount of gas. And when we overgive and overpromise, we can build resentment. We can get annoyed sometimes. So being regularly reliable over time is a goal. We also have to remember that our support relationships need to feel very different from our personal relationships. Um, and we want to remember that our goal as a caregiver is to connect a griever to resources in the community and develop internal coping skills and not have us be the most needed or the most special. I always refer a lot of our grieving parents to Courageous Parents Network or Emotion, which is a great place for grieving parents or grieving people to move their bodies, or Return to Zero. And these are all communities with like-minded people. So it's not just on me. Um, and finally, setting a time limit, as we talked about, to be together is really important because sitting with them in pain can be really heavy. Um, and we need to kind of keep that time boundary. So, our next area is looking at support for yourselves in environments. And I'm going to read this quote from a teacher who talked about a space that was built into a school community after a student had died. And the teachers were all supporting one another and the grieving students. But she says her name is Bianca Tolentino. She wrote on Backpacks and Baggage, Life After Educator Loss, Reflections from a First Year Teacher. And she writes, every Friday at noon, we will have a table for educators who want to process loss. And basically, by coming together and sitting at that table for as long as they needed to, they were able to unpack their backpacks. They still carry their own backpacks, but they were able to share. And often we can rebalance and refuel that way. And so I list a ton of things on this slide that you can do within environments, but a few I want to highlight are especially in a medical setting, but I think you can do this. I've been trying to do it a little bit at Good Grief, but having debriefings. And I'm going to go into that in a separate slide because it's so worth it. But some settings have debriefings upon request. Some do it during a monthly team meeting with a ritual. They're often facilitated by social workers or counselors, but anyone can learn how to do this. And I have a model for you, and I do sometimes give a talk on it. But it's a really powerful modality. Another thing you can do in your environment, in your work environment for that matter, is having individual supervision, either from a clinician or from someone in your work environment that you can share your interactions of support with. And this is really helpful if you're a less experienced survivor. As a baby social worker, I remember we had weekly supervision. Then, as we became more experienced, we had monthly. But I think the ability to check in, to receive guidance and education, to ensure ethical practice and professional growth is huge for us. And if you're in a place where you're providing grief support in group settings, whether it's schools, whether it's Good Grief, whether it's other organizations, I really encourage you to do kind of a pre-group and a post-group format because we always say that grief shared is grief halved. And even at Good Grief, we do a half hour of pre-group and a half hour of post-group just for our facilitators to be ready and centered and then to process. But in some places, we don't have that luxury. But even if you can meet with your co-facilitator, if you're lucky enough to have one for 5 minutes before, and just say, I had a really tough morning. I just need to let you know that. The other person is, I'm doing okay, so I've got you. Or if you're both depleted, you're going to have to realize, okay, we got to step up for this one today. And afterwards be able to be like, whoa, that actually made me feel better, made me feel good to support. So, really looking at that pre and post. Um, Again, finding a trusted colleague or friend at work who is there for you. Our goal is to have some supports built in work. It may not be your supervisor, it may be someone else. Um, Maybe our family members at home don't want to hear about the heaviness at the end of the day. So finding someone at work. One of my favorite environmental tools of supports is this thing I discovered when at Good Grief we went and did a little session for at Bank of America with their ERG. I had never heard of an ERG, and that stands for Employee Resource Group. And I think the places that have these are amazing. And if not, I think maybe you could see if you could start one. But they're affinity groups in a workplace, and they can have themes. The group that asked us to come was a group for grievers at a workplace. But there are ERGs that focus on divorce, on caregiving for aging relatives, and more. So I think that we don't realize that many of our coworkers and colleagues are grieving and might need support, or they're supporting grievers. We tend to silo, and I also want to say that I respect that I had people in groups I supported who wanted to compartmentalize and not have their grief be at work. It was a break. It was a place to just have that be the focus, and their grief was at home more, and other people had pictures of their person who died up at work. So it is not anything that we say you have to go to this. It's just having a space, and feeling heard and seen and shared. I think also creating support groups in schools, whether it's K through 12 schools or colleges, is really important. If a lot of colleges lately are having like an every Friday 4 to 5 group for grieving students, it may be a personal loss, they may be grieving a student that died from their campus they didn't even know, but it brings up a lot for these students. And I think when you offer those as an educator, the weight of the losses can feel lighter for you because these students, these grievers, have a place to go. And another one I want to focus on is community rituals. And this kind of applies to schools a little bit more, but I think it could be for any workplace, which is having a card for the grieving person in your break room that people can sign. Putting in schools, we learned about this great modality of putting a big piece of white butcher paper up in the hallway. I've heard for 2 months, but even a month, where students and faculty can write anything they want that is their grief being expressed right to the person. Sometimes people give this to the parents of the student who died. Sometimes it's just kept having a memory box, but a place where people can go. The Life with Loss tables at lunchtime. Something in healthcare settings that I love is called a code lavender or having tea for the soul. And that is a rapid response crisis intervention program that was designed to provide immediate emotional support to nurses and any healthcare staff following a traumatic loss or stressful event. And it's beautiful. Often chaplains and counselors can kind of bring tools. Sometimes we'd bring tea carts, and people can just know that they're being supported. But it's acknowledging that when you're caretaking and caregiving, you have feelings too. And when we see these rituals happening, we see that we're getting support. And it's a communal ritual. And then the last one I share with you is when you're in a smaller team, you can create rituals as well. And you're going to see in this next slide that our small palliative care team created a ritual that we did. And there are only five of us. In this one, there were four that participated. And you have it up right now. So, um, what we did is we really felt solidarity in our expressions and our ritual to support ourselves as we were supporting this little one's grieving family. And her mom has always given me permission to share her story, share her name, Brooklyn. Um, we as a team were really struggling with our own grief, and we had supported her for over a year, and it was during the pandemic. It was really heavy. We became surrogate family. So we decided to do something to honor her. It was a Friday and send the pictures to each other. And so this simple acknowledgement helped us to find some inner peace with this expression. And when we shared it with one another, we felt much peace and we could return to work a little bit lighter. And I think you can see from, the slide at the beach, it's really, we really feel deeply. We really carry a lot of heaviness. This was impacting our being able to support other families and be at work. So someone wrote it in the sand, someone wrote it with flower petals, two other team members lit a candle. It was really, really powerful. And we also created another ritual at our work. There's so many ways to do this, but if we don't do this, we're gonna burn out. And we've seen this happen before.
I just want to share really quickly before you go to your next slide. Nicole put into the chat. If I'm going through something, I need to talk. I always ask them if they have the headspace to spare. I just thought that was really beautiful to share.
I love that. I think that is a powerful tenet in life in general is to ask somebody, do you have time to listen? Do you have the bandwidth? I really would like to talk. And so asking that, letting them know. Because sometimes someone's like, I actually am just going to this and that. And other times, if I'm a social worker, I can say, yes, let's go, or do you need to go for a walk? Thank you for pointing that out, Nicole. So just on to the next slide, because I'm aware of our time, is just a little bit about debriefing because I'm so passionate about it. And all I can tell you is that there, in one of the debriefings I led at the hospital, an ER physician had been doing work for 25 years, attended a debriefing, was virtual during the pandemic, and said, "Oh my gosh, I have been doing this work for 25 years and I've never done this. And it feels so good and it feels so much better. And I can't believe I haven't done it." So when debriefing occurs, one has the strength to go on. They are structured group meetings and they emphasize venting emotions and other reactions to events and deaths. It doesn't have to be death. It could be just a tough, morally distressing event. But the goal is to reduce the impact of the event and accelerate the return to normal work functioning. As I said, it can be anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. We realize people's time frames, but I do think it's not realistic to say we're going to do it in a half hour quickly, because the emphasis is on processing our own emotions with zero judgment. It's being with people who get it. It's talking about some ideas. It's filling in gaps sometimes. It's um, uh, helping us relieve our burdens. And if you can't debrief, um, we have a packet. It was one of my social work interns created a packet that's called Relaxation, Caring, and Coping, and we would have it available for people who to take home, and you can do it at your own pace. But the idea is just learning not to move forward so quickly. Sometimes you have to move on to the next situation, the next case. You have to be somewhere. You have to get a child to school. They've just dropped something in your lap that's really powerful. And so finding space on your own time to process is really important. But I think this practice can help us feel better and a little bit lighter. So the next slide is a book that I highly recommend for everybody. And a lot of you, that what you put during Catch and Carry, I think this could speak to you. But Francis Weller is one of my grief celebrities. I have several. And he wrote a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow: Rituals of Renewal and the Sacred Work of Grief. That grief is a communal, sacred and essential experience, not a private affliction that must be embraced to live fully. Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground. And rituals have been a part of grief community for hundreds of years, but our modern landscape has focused so much on the privacy and individual processes. And so I so value what he brings to us about helping it return to communities. And as I had just shared about all these different things we can do in the workplace, Annette and I were able to be at a middle school where we support the students were asking for us to do something to honor two students who had died. And they just felt like their school community just moved on quite quickly. They had the Trauma and Loss Coalition. It was wonderful for a day, but they're still in shock. So we came several times and they put on a little kind of celebration of life, a little space. They knew exactly what they needed and we just supported it. And some teachers showed up too who felt the same way. But it can include singing and moving and sharing stories. And they all shared stories, these sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. It was so powerful. Um, so I think that, you know, this is Francis Weller's message, and I encourage you to read it, because it really helps you on an individual level, but also kind of bring this to our communities. And we need to learn how to stay well. And, we burn out not because we don't care, but because we don't grieve. In order to hold others' grief, we need to learn to hold our own. And we don't have time to delve into, and it's not really that relevant, but the three big potential negative outcomes of caregiving are called vicarious traumatization, compassion fatigue, and burnout. And there's some similarities throughout them all. And what they have in common is there is physical and emotional depletion from not staying whole as a caregiver. And it can really affect your job performance and your emotional well-being as a caregiver. Um, so we talk about doing all of this so we can, and being present and validating our emotions and really being able to take some breaks from the intense emotion of grief. And so it leads me into our last section of our webinar, which is going to give you some tools. And I think the community environments ones are huge. But we're kind of only partway there now. Like at our grief orgs, I think we're working those in. But this is something you can do for yourselves, on your own at all kinds of time. And I want to give you these tools. And I come with a framework of what's called post-traumatic growth. And that was kind of a term coined by Tedeschi and Calhoun in the 1990s. And it refers to the positive psychological change that some individuals experience after a life crisis or traumatic event. And what I like about it is that it doesn't deny our distress and pain, but rather it talks about that, from the adversity, from grief and pain can grow changes in understanding ourselves and others and the world. And we see this so much at Good Grief, that a lot of our kids that start as a child at Good Grief and come for, our average stay at Good Grief in the groups is 2 to 4 years. We see them becoming facilitators, them working at our grief camp, them going into health, mental health, education, all of those fields of caregiving, and it's their compassion is incredible. That's an example of post-traumatic growth. They could want to distance from it big time. So if they can experience that, I say we can too. And through our self-exploration, acknowledgement of all the feelings we feel in all of our roles, whether we're a family member, whether we're an educator, whether we're in healthcare, whether you're in organ donation or funeral home industry, we're going to weep. We are going to feel angry. We are going to worry. It feels unfair. We're the people in my group that I carry, and last night I had a caregiver group, and I'm just carrying so much that I know today. My co-facilitator couldn't be there, and so I know I need to do some writing today. I'm can't stop thinking about it. So it's all part of our work, and it's a privilege and the sacred part, but we have to take care of our heart and our soul and our body. So I always say if we put up a wall for our feelings and reactions, we're going to deny growth. So we're going to look for a few minutes about how we decompress and how we can use intentional practices to continue to do this work. I also honor a book called Trauma Stewardship, an everyday guide to caring for self while caring for others. That's by Laura Vandernoot Lipsky and Connie Burke. And it's a great book about how to manage the emotional toll of carrying other people's stories. And I come to you from a mindfulness approach to each day. And John Kabat-Zinn wrote a great book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And it really speaks to paying attention on purpose to the present moment without judgment. And as grief support caregivers, we need to regain our sense of balance and be able to step away and allow things to be just as they are, knowing that grief is lifelong, it's going to ebb and flow. And we have to notice how this is affecting us as a human and what we can do as we carry their stories. So being able to just use that mindfulness perspective of stopping and pausing and checking in with your body thoughts and feelings a couple times throughout each day, and maybe especially after caregiving sessions, is something I really encourage. And so I have so many tools for you, and you are going to be getting, with the copy of the recording, a lot of some specifics and some of these techniques and some bibliographies. But I want to go over how important having these approaches um, to engage with, can make a difference for you. And the field of narrative medicine is a new one, but it's really about writing and as a healing and healthcare professional, helping you connect with your caregiving and your patients, if you will. Um, so I love to talk about writing, and I have the idea is through writing we allow our feelings and emotions to have their space and unearthing. And I have some tools to share with you, about five. But before I go over them, I actually have a writing piece I wanted to share. And this is one of my colleagues and mentor, Michelle Post's way of self-care writing. And I want to give a warning that it has to do with the death of a child. So feel free to mute me or step away or whatever you need to do. But I feel like it's a beautiful way to show that there is clearly grief and hurt in this, but also hope and her way of releasing. And this is a piece of prose, and it's called Beauty Mark by Michelle Post. Tonight I sit under the big cobalt sky and I write for you, little one. There is a single small cloud in the sky, just randomly there with no other clouds around it. As I write and stare at it, it's dissipating. It's becoming smaller and smaller. Soon it will be gone. No one will know it was even there. But I will. I will remember it. I will remember because it reminds me of the irregularly shaped birthmark on your pinky toe of your left foot. I noticed your birthmark when I met you today, and I noticed your long curly lashes and beautiful eyebrows. Que guapo, your grandmother said to me in Spanish, and those words I understood. What handsomeness. Yet I'm sorry I met you today because that means you've died. That is my work, comforting the family of the deceased. And I did today. Your mother and brother and family are better equipped to deal with each other because of the dialogue we started today in that hot, small conference room off the PICU. Tonight, your brother will finally have validation for what he has been sensing, that you are no longer here. You've died. He knew it when he kissed you, before your family accepted it. He knew you were already dead. In your small little 6-year-old body, you fought your whole life against congenital diseases until your heart finally gave out. Revived, but not before you died. Brain death. And now your little body lies there to fight to save the lives of others through gifts of life. You are so brave, little boy. Many will know you will never know you even existed, like the cloud in the sky or the beauty mark on your pinky toe. But I will know. You all were here. You all existed. And the lives you save and all their family and all their birthmarks and all their clouds in the sky, they will know you existed. They will know your fight. They will know it led to victory. And your family, we will love them as long and as we can and give them whatever we can to support them through this. If you can already see me sitting here typing under the sky with the cloud no longer visible, thank you for allowing me to be with your family today. And thank you for your gifts. I have found that Michelle, thank you for letting me read that. I have found that Michelle's techniques that I learned in conferences of writing about a specific person, to them, about them, helps me with unearthing it and honoring them and honoring myself. So, some of the techniques I share with you include intuitive writing, using writing prompts, which will send you barf writing, which is just writing without grammar, capitals, periods, anything that just comes out. Um, and scribbling and art techniques. For example, taking an old book page or the blackout method, where you either circle the words or you black out everything but things that stand out to you. And lo and behold, it makes a really amazing and deep piece of writing. Because of time, I'm not going to read you this one, but it's pretty profound. And it has an incredible flow. Putting on music while you're doing this can really help. And speaking of music, curating playlists for yourselves. I have playlists for crying. I have a dad that was in my grief group that made one that was for anger, and he would run and pound the pavement with it. And then playlists for remembrance or honoring or connecting to a specific person, and access those as needed. Sometimes I play them on the way to my grief groups, and on the way home I need silence. Rituals, creating rituals, lighting candles. Sometimes after every grief visit, I would light a candle at home just for the rest of the night. Going into nature. Going to funerals for some people is really helpful. It can help you as a caregiver and support person realize that there is support there for a person, maybe from the work community or other friends, but maybe you don't see that and you realize the power that you need to connect them to more resources. Um, the modality of art, painting, collage, and a favorite one of mine is ceramics. One of our facilitators, Marjorie, does ceramics, and it's a deeply physical outlet which can allow you to release, grow, destroy, start over, very cathartic. And then gardening in nature can be a great physical outlet. Thanks to Diana Pacina, one of our facilitators of Good Grief, she created a garden of remembrance there, and we have grieving families and facilitators all working together, working in the soil. And now we're seeing from our work in October, November, these flowers coming up. Um, but just creating some rituals for yourselves in your process that might be creative. And there's just endless ones, and I will send you lots of prompts for people you support and for yourselves. I like to have the acronym PRAM, which is pause, reflect, acknowledge, and be mindful of what you need. And I can't do this webinar without using two beautiful slides that my one of my mentors, Donna Sherman from the Dougie Center in Portland, Oregon, who we had the pleasure of being with at our Spring Institute 2 weeks ago, shared with me over 25 years ago, and I think they have helped me stay sustainable. Um, and the first one is warning signs. And these are good things to notice and keep in mind for clues that we might be out of balance. And I'm just going to highlight a few that I think are important. And the one is the sense of never feeling like you're able to do enough. That sense of feeling helpless and hopeless. Another one, which I have experienced, is hypervigilance. It's when loud noises startle you and jar you, even when I'm getting a text. It's just a sense that we need to create some inner calm and co-regulation. Another one is the inability to embrace complexity. I found that fascinating, that to get out of choosing, if you're always saying, I don't care, it doesn't matter, whatever, you just can't get to that level of like what you want. You're kind of empty. Another one is an inability to listen because you can't take in anymore. I know that I'm like that sometimes. At home, a little bit of irritability. I'm just short because I just have, maybe that's from the moral distress. And the last one, which I think can happen with caregivers, is the sense of grandiosity, which is an inflated sense of our own work and feeling irreplaceable. Like we're the only one that can do this, and I'm not going to delegate because I do it best, and we have to share this and trust that other people have things to give, and it's not just about us. And and on the flip side of that is what are some individual strategies that we can do regularly? And again, Donna Sherman generously shared these slides with me, and I've had periods of compassion fatigue big time. But I think with a lot of these and with a trusted therapist that took, it takes time to find a good fit with a therapist, doing things that bring joy and laughter to yourself. I tend to want to watch all grief-oriented movies, dramas, heavy stuff, all the documentaries. And I need to balance that sometimes with a Ted Lasso or some other things that are a little bit lighter. Moving your body, even around your workplace on a break. Just 5 minutes of lying down, putting on some music, and stretching your body out. You don't, yoga doesn't work for me. I wish it would, but just lying down and stretching, tuning in. Spending time with people who are supportive and trustworthy and avoiding ones who vomit all over you. And I think you know what that means, which is telling you the same thing over and over again. We are not everybody's therapist, but we tend to feel like we have therapists on our forehead. So, have really spending time with people where there's reciprocity. And this is my favorite one, and Annette loves this one so much, which is hang out with 2 to 4 year olds. 2 to 4 year olds are incredible. They are present, they are funny, they are honest. They just kind of give me a rebooting. And I think that it is, and in our grief groups, because we have our green group is 3 to 5 year olds, they are magical. And our facilitators in that group really share some really special things with them. And the last one is attend workshops and symposiums. There are a lot of ones that are no charge, but also apply for scholarships because we want all of us to be able to go there so we can learn, we can reinvigorate, and we can connect with like-minded caregivers. And there are plenty of conferences and summits for grieving family members or us who are grieving ourselves. There's the Bereaved Parents of the USA has an annual summit, and I think it's in Pittsburgh this year. But with workshops, the going to workshops is a huge way of filling your cup. And so I want to make sure we have a few minutes left for questions, and I'm sorry that I could not give another half hour because I have so much to say and so much to share. I want us to have dialogues. But as we do at Good Grief, I know there were some heavy moments, and reading that piece from Michelle, and just kind of all that this brings up for us. We like to end with the closing ritual, which helps us transition into kind of if you have to go back to work. And I know one of you has a long to-do list. And also just with what's going on, I'm going to acknowledge in our world and all the layers of all kinds of grief, not just in our roles. But I want to read you a quote that I keep up in my office. And most importantly, I want to thank you all so very much for being here in this space with us, for all that you do to support grievers in whatever space you care give, and especially for those of you who are doing it in your personal lives, um, and feel alone. I want you to know that everyone deserves to be felt and seen and heard so that we can continue to do this work and to care give. And so I read this to you. It is not selfish to refill your own cup so that you can pour into others. It's not just a luxury, it is essential. So, with that,
Thank you, Gina. Thank you so much. You're getting a lot of thanks in the chat. Folks that are saying this was really good for them. They really liked your I always get the acronym wrong, so I want to make sure that I put it right, where it's about pause, reflect, acknowledge,
Pram.
them.
Pram, yeah, they make badge buddies for people that are in healthcare field
Um,
that, yeah.
Great work. It was awesome, getting tons of accolades. And, I did put into the chat a link to a quick Microsoft Forms just so that you guys can let us know your thoughts, let us know what other subjects you would like for us to bring to you through these webinars. I also want to thank Gina so much for not only putting this together, but the exhaustive and extensive list of resources that you are all going to get.
I'm a resource
It's
queen, as Annette
amazing.
knows.
She is the resource queen, as I've coined her. So I'm really excited for you guys to get your hands on that. And please, if you haven't registered already, next month, April 26th, we'll be having New Beginning, Same Grief, where we'll be talking about supporting transition moments in schools with myself. It's a 1 hour webinar. It's really to help recognize grief in students during those spring transitions, distinguish it from typical stress. We're going to talk about some SEL strategies, some ways to strengthen rituals and guides, through those tests, through those milestones and through those graduations. So be on the lookout for that registration link if you haven't already. I'm very mindful of the time. So those of you that have to leave, we totally understand. But those of you who would like to stay and have some questions, Gina and I can hang around for a little bit. But thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all so very much. And Gina, thank you also very much for helping us out here and for giving us just a little piece of your brain, ma'am. That was amazing. Good job.
Oh, well, and I already see in the chat because I did not have it going. But Compassionate Friends and a group called GRASP, which is Grief Recovery After Substance Passing. But there are so many wonderful groups that are peer led and are in the community in all their national chapters of them. And they're wonderful. They're free and unlimited again. And they're ways to also get involved because I know with grief that sometimes if it's happening in our personal lives, we are receiving, but at the same time, we can then sometimes turn into facilitators and lend this knowledge, and that's very empowering. And it also reminds us of kind of where we were. Grief never goes away; it's lifelong, but it changes. And so by doing that, I know that we have participants at Good Grief who will say, I like staying because now I remember I was that new person, and now I have a little more bandwidth and space, and I want to be able to reflect and help them. So, but yeah, please, any questions, comments? Oh, GRASP is Grief Recovery After Substance Passing.
Let me write
Paying
that
it forward to other grievers, exactly. And it benefits both because I can also think of a new person in our spousal loss group who has remarked after maybe 9 months since the loss that just seeing you women sitting there being able to even laugh or that you're here after 3 years, it gave me hope and it empowered me to know that not only could that possibly happen, but I can find my people. Oh,
down.
pet loss community. Yes, yes, huge. We pet loss is what I call a disenfranchised loss, along with loss from addiction, pregnancy and infertility. It's loss, which is losses that are not acknowledged fairly or enough by our community. Pet loss is huge on so many levels, and I feel like we're coming around a little bit. But yes, I actually. I just remember this. I was asked to do a support group at our hospital at UCLA for the people who were in the pet therapy program at UCLA whose pets had died. And I didn't have dogs at the time, which I do now. And I didn't laugh. I'm a very sensitive person, but I kind of thought, oh, we're going to do a group for it was the most powerful loss I have ever done. I was crying. We were all crying together because their animals were in the therapy program. So they were on the beds of people who were dying. They were getting to know the people that were receiving from them. So they were, of course, as people that have pets and have this feeling, an unconditional love. And I think a person at our pet therapy program said pets are like children with special needs where they're fully dependent on us and they're unconditional. And so when I get home from doing group, what do? The first thing I lie down and I cuddle my dogs. I think my husband is jealous. Um, but yeah, it's a huge loss that we need to process and people really say, oh, well, it doesn't compare to this. We don't have the Grief Olympics, as Annette and I always say. We don't have to compare. It is a profound loss. So thank you for bringing that up. And I think someone
It's
wrote
definitely misunderstood.
Veterinary Hope Foundation. Sorry, Annette. What were you saying?
No, I'm saying it's definitely it's different. I before I had my cats, I would probably think the same thing. Like, really, do we really need this? And he could be hiding under the table, and I think one of the kids let him out, and I'm like already in hysterics, like, oh my God, he's down the block. There's a car, and he's like hiding somewhere in the closet, and I done yelled at everybody in the house. But yeah, I agree with you.
Any questions, please, please, please.
Tons of thank yous, Gina. Tons.
hmm. I thank you all so much. And, very honestly, because I'm a very honest person, and transparent, that, this is a huge topic. And I really would like to give it more time and spend more time. But I wanted to cover some of the basic things. But I know that some of you who are on from the funeral industry or child life or healthcare, in your unique roles, or schools, please reach out to us. We also give tours of our centers. We do PDs. I can do a debriefing model training session for you. That is, one of our things we offer on our menu. So, yeah, there's so much out there that we can do, and the more we talk about it and um, kind of get creative again,
Back to
the
basics, like you and I always say.
the what?
Going back to basics, like you and I always say. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just presence over perfection is something that
Yes, yes.
do a lot.
Thank
But
you.
we are now at 104 and I don't see any more questions. I see people that are signing off and saying their thank yous. Folks that are
Mm,
saying you're a wealth of information and experience. She is
thank
100% my special grief guru as well, Mary Jo.
Mm.
So we are in unison in that. But thank you all so much for joining us. Please let us know
Please,
your
please
thoughts.
please take care of yourself today too, with what we talked about, because even though we feel comfortable with this and we do it, we have to practice what we preach. And, we need to, I know I'm going to just go on a walk today because I care about this subject so much and I've been putting a lot of time into it. And so I know that that's one thing I need, and I need to write about last night's group. So, the more that we have, and I love how death cafes are around now. We're having these conversations. So thank you for paying it forward. And we are here. So thank you, Annette, for having me. I really
Thank you,
appreciate the
Gina. Thank
space and the
you.
time.
We're going to sign off now. Thank you all so much. You all have our email addresses. You will get a copy of the recording, a certificate of attendance if you attended live, as well as Gina's resources. So be on the lookout for that. Bye, Gina. I'll see you later. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you so much.